NFTs and DAOs, a new age of empowerment. Come on up. Welcome, welcome. So that's good. I like those quick conversations and questions, even with 5 minutes. So yeah, please grab a mic. There you go. Thanks, Manon Dave.
Thank you, thank you. Big up my frame store crew at the back. My name is Manon. Hold on, I'm going to find a clicker. My name is Manon. Dave is my last name, contrary to popular belief, especially by the people working here. And I'm here to talk about how NFTs and DAOs, I guess, can be a real tool for empowerment. And one of the things that I've been thinking a lot about, by the way, I'm not going to be pitching you any particular project or a DAO here today. It's more about kind of navigating my thought process and the discovery of, I guess, this technology and this kind of wave of new ways of thinking about money and deposits and pools of money. So I'll start with a little bit about myself and my background. If you guys don't recognize this logo, you don't know what CREAM stands for, I have helped you out at the bottom here. You probably do not belong in New York City right now, but CREAM, or Cash Rules Everything Around Me, is an observation that I think many of us have seen across the course of our lives and professional careers. Now for me, growing up as a kid, we didn't really have much, and I lived across 3 women's refuges with my mum and my sister growing up. So for us, it was always, a great escape to kind of finish school and be taken to a youth center where we could pick up new skills, whether it be music making, art class, sports. There was always some kind of sanctuary where we were continuing our education in one form or another, the education of life, I guess. But over time, and I don't know if it's the same in the United States, but in the UK where I'm from, there's been massive budget cuts, and it's been very, very difficult to maintain those things, not just the youth centers themselves, but also actually some of the refuges that I lived in. And so it's been, a bit of a difficult thing to, obviously you're trying to support your family, you're trying to develop a career and all that stuff, but you're not really able to help out the people that helped you out in many cases, because actually you're relying on a centralized fund, which is distributed by people who, of course, we elect. And don't worry, I'm not knocking democracy here, but I do think that it's super important to find new ways and interesting ways of empowering the people in those communities to actually have some control and have some say in how to distribute that money that could help their communities. So I think the thing I love about this entire space, just as a gamer and somebody who's super into, I guess, the gamification of also products and technology in the last couple of decades, is the idea that there is somehow an in-game currency to what's happening here. And if we look at it that way for a second, then I think DAOs are a great way of having, I guess, faction-driven in-game currency. So if in fact these 10,000 PFPs or variations of them are devised somehow into different communities and groups, then perhaps those communities and groups also have both individual and collective pools of cash that they could redistribute in meaningful ways. So, we can take a popular example of the Bored Ape community. They have various, I guess, evolutions of the Bored Apes. They have factions, if you like. They have the M1 mutants and the original apes and the M2s. Imagine the Bored Apes actually were not this, global brand now, but they're actually a collection for people in inner city New York. And those factions represented different neighborhoods in inner city New York. If a DAO, which, became a fairly large pool of cash because of the popularity of a brand, even a fraction of that, a 2.5%, a 5%, which is anyway what, there are cuts that have been taken up smart contracts, was to be redistributed to those communities and perhaps elected leaders or even just upvoting in those communities. And again, I'm not here to say that there's one way or another to do it. It's super interesting to think about what people could do with that cash and ways in which that they could actually, I think, improve the living conditions, the access to education, the access to other types of skills. So that's an idea that's super interesting to me. The other idea, I guess, is that, all of us, and I've been to a few of the sort of fringe parties and stuff that have been happening over the course of the week, the idea that somehow, we're kind of this random group of people that are all coming together around the idea of these technologies and of these pieces of art, and without belittling any of that, I do think that there is something super interesting in the idea that there are sort of these peripheral benefits to this. A network is emerging. Like this is my first NFT.NYC. First time I've been to a lot of these collection events, and I'm starting to realize, like, wow, I'm actually plugged into a group of super creative, super talented, in some cases very powerful people. Is there a way to leverage that for empowerment, for social good, and at the same time still continue to develop what we've been developing as a community and as an industry in this space? So I guess, all in all, what I would like to think about is whether or not we can start to look at DAOs rather than a repository of cash to further develop ideas about roadmap within the communities that we're joining. Maybe finding ways to really take a look at local or global or even individual development as part of belonging to these communities. I think that we're sort of reaching a plateauing phase, in my opinion, even though it's only a year in, which sounds crazy to say. But I feel like we're reaching this plateauing phase of where just being in a community for the art or for the flip or for the fact that, you know, you might get to go to some cool parties is kind of slowing down. And I think a lot of us, at least I speak for myself, are waking up to the fact that there must be something bigger at play here. And to me, what the bigger thing is at play is this idea of decentralization, not just of contracts, of decision-making, but of the actual cash that can ultimately push us in a different direction, both at a local level and indeed at a global level, whether you see that as political or otherwise. So I was just here to share some thoughts about that as somebody who is still a evolving degenerate. But if you guys have any questions or have any conflicting thoughts, I'd love to hear them. Any questions in the room? Thank you, whoever's asking me the question.
Yeah, I think in some ways when we talk about empowerment and benefiting the community, we're talking about maybe when projects used to mint out and there was a lot of money, and now, you know, maybe these DAOs are just broke. You know, they're not going to mint out. They're not going to get the money they promised. You know, the roadmap is just thrown to the wind. You know, they might just rug pull because they didn't meet the goals. What do you think? Is there any solution for that? Do you know, have you considered that, or is that kind of run into any solutions?
I think that the one benefit, personally, of look, there are brands and there are high-profile individuals that are always late to the party. It's actually mine and some of my friends' jobs to help those people understand what's happening in spaces like this. But I think there is a benefit of those people who are late to the party, because actually a lot of their interests lie in, of course, seeing if there's new ways to engage audiences, new ways to make a bunch of money. But actually, there are rules of engagement for a lot of those individuals who have those high profiles and also organizations who have higher profiles. I think that they have the ability to actually, I think, continue the trend, you know, of acquisition of resource, whatever you see the resource as, right? People or money or attention. And so I think that if we are to, you know, rather than, I think, deflect some of those interests, like start to invite them in and find ways of curating the way in which people assemble DAOs. And, you know, one of the things that we've been talking to one of our partners about is the fact that you can't actually, even as a huge brand or a huge high-profile individual, you can't actually just release a collection and expect to make that kind of money and like you say, rug pull an audience because you're a celebrity. You actually have to really engage and understand what people care about. And I just think that where it might have been going in a direction where everybody cares about, like, can I invest in this and make a ton of money? I think that there are folks who are educated in the space, want to do good, and especially if you can find ways to impact your direct community or direct life beyond just the cash. I think that there is an interest in that, and it might be a minority for now, but again, my talk here is to suggest that perhaps as you guys embark on your projects, you could take that little bit of consideration of, can you afford to give up a 1%, a 2%, a 0.5% into a DAO that is up to the community to suggest and vote and even deliver on ideas that are empowering people. Sorry for the long-winded answer. Cool.
Okay, just one quick question here. Here we go.
Thanks. Can you give, I know there's like the Unicorn DAO, which is doing some of what you're talking about. Can you give some specific examples of how that works within a DAO?
Yeah, so I mean, I think two examples were already shared by sort of the previous panel and a couple of the questions that were raised. There's the typical kind of like upvoting technique, which is, I think, pretty typical of most of the bigger DAOs. So people in the community, holders of these NFTs or tokens, will essentially suggest ideas that a portion of the DAO, or they can even specify the amount of resource from the DAO that they need in order to execute a particular idea, and those ideas, pretty much in any sort of democratic format, get voted on by the community, and all votes are equal in some cases. In other cases, the amount of tokens you hold increase the weight of your vote, for example. So that's one way. Another way, actually, the gentleman on the panel earlier was mentioning almost appointing, I guess in a more traditional way, appointing a community leader or several community leaders who represent slightly different viewpoints or different factions of that community. One that I've been following closely, maybe you're aware of it, maybe you're not in this room, but there's a popular collection called Droplets, which is all about access to clean water for communities around the world who don't have access to that. And so in that case, what they've done is they've really tapped into local leaders in that space, people who've been raising money and trying to put on events and create resource for this for decades. And they're working really, really closely with individuals within those groups, typically not the individuals that you would expect, people who I think are more on the forefront of trying to push innovation in those spaces, to join the DAO, even govern the DAO, and make sure that ideas that are kind of coming through from the community are feasible, achievable, and will actually make a notable impact.
All right, Manon, thanks so much.
Cool.
Very much appreciated.
Thank you guys very much.
Well said. Thank you.